Hello, this is Mr. Mola for lesson 1-7, Simplifying Expressions. So you'll see our objectives for today are reviewing commutative and associative property, and then reviewing how to use a distributive property, and then combining like terms. So we'll start with commutative and associative. So if we look at the commutative property, kind of looks like the word commute, and that's basically what it means, how we can go back and forth. So how 3 plus 5 is the same as 5 plus 3, how 4 times 3 is the same as 3 times 4, things like that. Remember, this only works with addition and multiplication, does not work with subtraction and division. Because if I would subtract 3 minus 5, that's not the same as 5 minus 3. The other property is the associative property. And this looks like the word associate. So it just changes up how we are associating the numbers. So here you see we have 6 plus 8 plus 2, with parentheses around 8 and 2. And you'll see here you have the parentheses around 6 and 8. So it doesn't matter which way I add them up. 6 plus 8 plus 2 is always going to be 16. Kind of the same thing here. 7 times 4 times 5. Order of operations would say I would do 7 times 4 first. But here we have the parentheses around the 4 and the 5. It doesn't matter when I multiply all those numbers. It's going to end up with the same answer. And then again, this only works for addition and multiplication. Subtraction and division are going to be different. And then when we're combining like terms, remember they need to have the same variable in it. So I can combine a 4x and a 3x because the variable is both x. And then I can combine my constants. The reason these are called constants is because these don't change. 2 is always going to be the value of 2. X could change from problem to problem. It could be 5 one problem, it could be 2 another problem. It's always going to change. Remember that number in front of the variable is called coefficient. So basically we are just adding the coefficients. Alright, and then going back to some adding and subtracting, I know we talked about this the first day. There's not really a wrong way to do this, there's just a smarter way to do it. So if I'm adding up these numbers, 45, 16, 55, and 4, probably not the best idea to add up 45 and 16 right away. I'd probably add up 16 and 4 right away to give me 20. And then kind of the same thing here. I would add up 45 and 55 right away to give me 100. So I have 100 plus 20, which is going to give me 120. You would get the same answer if you added up 45 plus 16 plus 55 plus 4, but that's a little more difficult to do in our heads. Same thing here for the multiplication problem. I have 1/3 times 5 times 33. Well, the smart thing to do would do 1/3 times 33 first to give me 11, and then 11 times 5 to give me 55. Again, you would get the same answer if you did 1/3 of 5, but you would just get a fraction then, and we don't want to deal with any more fractions. And then if you did 1/3 of 5 times 33, you'd still get 55. So no matter what, you're ending up with the same answer. Next is distributive property. Remember, the word distribute means to pass out evenly. If you're bringing birthday treats, you're bringing one for everyone in the class. If you're bringing something, everyone has to get it. So if I'm distributing it to everything in there. And we'll kind of see after this example here. Okay, so we talked about this. I know we talked about a problem like this on the first day of school. So instead of multiplying big numbers like this, 8 times 33, that's really the same as multiplying 8 times 30. And then adding it to 8 times 3. So 8 times 3 is going to give me 24. 8 times 30 is going to give me 240. So a lot simpler math that we can do probably in our heads. And then I need to add them up. 240 plus 24 is going to give me 264. Okay, so I think that's a lot simpler than doing just 8 times 33. I didn't change anything. I still did 8 times 30 and 8 times 3. 30 plus 3 is 33. It's the same thing. Let's review some properties. So 7 plus 6 is the same as 6 plus 7. I am using the commutative property. It's going back and forth. I am commuting. Okay, 5 times A times B is the same as 5 times A times B. which is the associative property. Here's another one where it's going to be the associative property. 6 plus 4 plus 2 is the same as 6 plus 4 plus 2. So it just depends on where the parentheses are. And this last one is going to be an example of the commutative property. And then here I have an example of the distributive property, because I'm distributing the 10 times the 2 and then the 10 times the 3. Here I have the associative property. And then here I have the commutative property, just going back and forth. A times B plus 2C is the same as B times A plus 2C. Alright, so when I'm talking about the distributive property, remember, if I'm distributing it to both. So this 8 needs to be distributed to the n and to the 4. So then my answer would be 8n plus 32. Okay, I can't simplify that to get 40n. It's just going to stay like that. Same thing here. 3 needs to get distributed to the 4w and to the 7. So that my answer here would be 12w plus 21. So 3 times 4 is 12. The w just stays along. 3 times 7, 21. Then here I would do the same thing. The negative 6 gets distributed to the 5x and to the negative 2. So negative 6 times a positive 5 is a negative 30. And I'll just bring the x along. And then negative 6 times a negative 2 is a positive 12. Let's do one where there's 3. So it doesn't matter if there's 3 terms in it. It's still going to be done the same way. So it still needs to get distributed to all 3. So negative 6 times a positive 3 is just going to be 18x. And negative 6 times a negative 2 is a positive 12. And then a negative 6 times a positive 4 is a negative 24. Then you will have a couple problems in the book that look like this, where you need to write out exactly what you did with each step and each property. So if I'm going with 14x plus 4, and then parentheses 2 times x, well, first thing you're doing is using the distributive property. And then you're going to multiply, and then you use the commutative property to switch them around, which is the associative property to group them differently, and then you're just going to combine those like terms. Here's another one that's a little shorter. So I'm using distributive property, 6 times x and 6 times 4. I'm going to multiply, and then since everything's already together, my numbers are already next to each other, I'm just going to combine like terms.